I'm here today with Sensei Omar Ahmad, the treasurer of the Worldwide Martial Arts Association. Thanks for spending some time with us today.
My pleasure.
Um, how long have we known each other? It's been a while.
I think my first was Tulsa in 98, 99?
Around me.
Yeah.
I can't tell you exactly. It's been a long time. Tulsa, were you at the one in Little Rock?
That's it. That's the one.
That
Little
was,
Rock.
That was the first one.
The
I
first one.
remember.
Yeah.
And then I think the next year was Tulsa.
Oh, okay. Yeah, maybe
I think.
I was at one of the somewhere around there.
Don't quote me on any of that. That was way too long.
It's been a long
ago.
time.
Yeah. What do you think about martial arts then versus martial arts now? That was 20-ish, 25 years
Yeah,
ago.
yeah. Well, at that time, that I was competing in a lot of no holds barred competitions. I was still fighting a lot back then. Actually, it was before I had won a couple of national championships and hadn't won my world championship in jiu-jitsu yet until 2002. And so I was still fighting, but we had no hand guards. The rules were very lax.
As they should be.
Yeah, yep. The rules were very lax. There were a lot of one and done people in there. They'd go for one fight and get really brutalized and they'd leave. And they didn't stop things. There was very little fighter safety, and so careers were very short, brutal. And I don't know that we made more than $100 a match. And a lot of the matches we had were were tournaments. They were tournament style. So you would fight someone and then have to fight two more times that night. And so,
Long day.
yeah, that's a long day. That's a hard way to earn a living. $300 and probably $3,000 in medical bills.
I was going to say, that's going to cover your hospital bills.
Well, that was one of the advantages of having a background in judo and jiu-jitsu at the time, is that you're fighting a lot of people who weren't necessarily well trained. They were either boxers or bouncers or people who were relatively tough, but there wasn't really a fixed set of curricula that you could teach people and work with people. And so there were a lot of people it was frightfully easy for a person who'd been trained to go in and take down and choke out somebody or armbar them. And they didn't know, a lot of times they didn't know to tap when they were in trouble. We heard the old guys, all the old Bushido-Kan guys like Jim Hartley and those guys talking about the days of early karate where they would fight Shiai until teeth were gone and people were bloody. So we didn't think it was that big of a deal.
Well, it wasn't. You did what you did.
That's right. And there was very little publicity around it, other than the fact that people, as soon as they found out it was happening, wanted to get rid of it, not knowing that there was a lot of people who were high-level martial artists and experienced people and smart people who did it to see the perfect expression of their sport. And I always tell people I just lucked into doing judo and jiu-jitsu because that's what they taught at my YMCA. And I had great, people that put me into would sponsor me to go to Camp Bushido and the JA for the junior national development team and all those other kinds of things. We were poor. We didn't have the money to go do stuff like that if they didn't pay for it, if someone didn't, if we didn't have that development program. And I thought that was really the death of American judo, was when the YMCA stopped being the development team and all that stuff. But I had a lot of opportunities to meet a lot of people who've made huge impacts in my life from doing those types of things. But that was right during that time. I had gotten out of gi sports and was I was kind of like, I'm not really into traditional stuff, and was fighting those money fights. And Sensei Mike McCoy, I was going back to graduate school. I had completed my doctorate in occupational therapy, but I wanted to get my PhD in neuroanatomy and go into a full professor track. Well, I knew one guy from camp who was a professor, and it was Professor Mike McCoy. And so I called him to say, well, I'm looking to get a PhD. I'm looking to go into a PhD program. And he says, well, come to Creighton. And we talked and we looked around. and everything like that. He hooked me in and said, well, I need you to help me with the guys team, and why don't you come work out? I said, I haven't been to gi in so long. He's like,
The
oh, don't
perfect match,
worry
you just
about
didn't
it.
know it yet, right?
That's right, that's
Yeah.
right. And so after that, the rest is history. It's been with him ever since.
If someone asked you, did you like things better back in the day, or do you prefer the way they are now, what would you say?
Well, I mean, everybody looks back in the past because it can't change, right? We look at the things that we want to look at in the past, and we look back and say, oh, it was so great back then. Well, you know what? It wasn't great for everybody. And to be perfectly honest, I had a rougher road back then than some other people did. And, dealing with a lot of the discrimination that I felt, especially, around about that time was 9/11, then all of a sudden it became very hard to be a Muslim in America and an immigrant and all that other kind of stuff. So, to be honest, the things I liked about back then were that people trained more. Well, we didn't have the internet, we didn't have a bunch of other stuff, and so what did we do? We worked out.
Do you think training was better then, or training was better now?
Training methods are better now. Training methods are better now. There is no reason why a person should take 60 throws on a hard mat
Without a crash pad.
It doesn't make sense. It doesn't somehow create a callus on you or something like that. But that's the way we used to. At the end of practice, every practice, 60 throws.
Yeah, very limited these days, if not by the rules, then by what they actually practice, which
And
is very disappointing to me.
So now, the training is so much better. Athletes are much bigger, much stronger, much better endurance. We have 178 countries competing at the Olympics now.
Unfortunately, we're what, 160?
Yeah. There's almost no other sport that has as many people competes in it as judo. It is one of the most competitive sports in the Olympics. The problem is we have wrestling here. Is that happens to be our national. Everywhere else, everybody's judo, but freestyle and folk style wrestling. And I'm a folk style coach. I coached in high level competition in high school and in club wrestling here in St. Louis. So I love wrestling too. But that's our sport. And that's why when you see the UFCs, who are the most successful athletes, well, by number, they're wrestlers and Americans. I think that's cool, being a wrestler and American. But it's not because wrestling is a superior sport. It just means that the wrestlers know the grind. They know how to work as hard as they need to be as good as Japanese at judo.
They work way harder than most martial artists, regardless of the art.
That's right, unless you go to other countries. Now, if you watch anyone who's seen any of those old tapes of Japanese players practicing, running up and down mountains in bare feet and throwing into sand pits and doing that 8-hour day training stuff, knows that's how wrestlers train here.
That's not the exception.
That's
the
right.
rule.
That's right. That's my high school team. We train like that. But here, we don't have the time, the energy, the commitment to be able to put that type of training in to judo. So we've been very successful in our program, both directions. I love them both. It's hard for me. If you said which was my favorite, I don't know.
That's going to be my next question.
Yeah. What's my favorite thing to do, or my favorite thing to watch, or those are all different questions.
I imagine actual teaching. What would be your favorite thing to teach? What do you get the most satisfaction out of?
I would say those middle schoolers, either in judo or wrestling, who are committed and they're at a turning point in their life where they might become a real bad kid, sit and watch a lot of video games, or they might be a champion. And really, it gives me an opportunity to spend a lot of time with them to talk about character, to talk about future goals, to talk about the fact that you got to be responsible for yourself in this world, because we all have excuses, right? Everybody's got a reason why they're not successful.
Why it's okay to fail.
Yeah. And you know what? Everybody will say, "Aw," and then they'll move on. That's it. They don't give a crap about you. You're responsible for your success in this world. And your refusal to take setbacks, that is the best thing that any kind of grappling can teach you. Is one, there is no worse sport to lose than grappling. I defy anyone. Maybe dueling. I could be less happy in a dueling situation.
That's possible, but that's probably the only one.
But when you're wrestling and you're looking at the ceiling, we used to have it written on the roof of the ceiling of our training room, if you can read this, you're losing. And it is, there is nothing as close to feeling like dying of failure than getting pinned to the ground. Who wants to be uke? The fact is that the uke is the more important position, because I can win, or I can be thrown, I can save myself, I can stop myself from being hurt. These are all self-defense. If you don't have someone to throw, you're not a tory.
Yeah, you cannot excel at the martial arts. Real martial arts require at least two people.
That's right. And I mean, why did Ronda Rousey do so well without even knowing how to punch somebody in MMA? Why? Because she knew how to approach with intensity. She knew how to execute her waza as well as she could, and she had a good will. When did she lose? When she started doing movies instead of training.
She got distracted.
Yeah, that's right.
That's what Kim has said 100 times.
Yeah. I really think that had she wanted to train and keep training like she would, but she got too big for that. I mean, to be honest, she got too big with the movies and the pro wrestling and all that stuff. She's making so much more money than getting punched in the face. And
well, and if you read the things that she says about being an Olympian, that's a thankless job.
yeah,
You devote your life to
for nothing. But what's nothing? That's what I'll say. Is what's nothing. I mean, a lot of what I do, I love, right? I love being a neuroscientist. I love being a professor. They happen to be financially remunerative positions, right? They happen to pay good. But I also love judo, and I've never made a nickel on martial arts, really. Even doing these types of things, I usually end up dipping into the family coffers and making a donation at the end at some point. Whether it's for shirts or whether it's for this or that, it just is what it is. But I love it. I love it. And when we say character development, so a lot of what this leads back to is the idea that in life we have responsibilities. The people who live a life without responsibility, that just have expectations, they are completely externally focused. What can you do for me? My relationships are now 100% transactional. Does this person provide me more than I provide them? Then they're a good friend. If this person loves me more than I love them, then they're a good spouse. The second things get tough, or that you have to provide more for them at a time, all of a sudden, you're not looking at it as uke and tori anymore. You're looking at it as a transactional relationship. Everybody's had bad things that happen to them in their lives. But to me, trauma is the stuff that you don't deal with. That by becoming wounded, you become traumatized. And then I look at people like my dad, who survived an ethnic cleansing by walking 1,500 kilometers through a desert and then being raised in a refugee camp. He is not traumatized by that. He saw people's heads cut off. And he chose not to be a wounded human being from that. To say, I'll never let that happen to other people. He became wise. And he said, now this puts in perspective all the things that I need to do in my life to ensure that these things will never happen. So, as a child, it's really hard to say, boy, I failed that test, I'm such a loser, I'm an awful person, I need to quit. When you've got a family member and people in the house who survived an ethnic cleansing, and I've never once in my life heard him complain about it or say that it somehow hurt him in any way. So I had great examples of this wounded wise dichotomy. Is that, so that's one thing that I wish for all of them, and I talk about that a lot. I use that phrase a lot, wounded and wise. So.
Do people understand what you're talking about?
Yeah, actually, so we have two special programs within our program. One is for people on the autism spectrum, and there's no one who gets more difficulty on a day-to-day basis to these kids. And the second group are occupational justice people, which are our recent immigrants and refugees. And these are people who are leaving war-torn countries who have seen things that you and I will never see.
If we're lucky.
And they're babies, they're kids. And so this is something that's really important to us.
Okay, in conclusion, what, in 50 words or less, put you on the spot here, I know it's the curse of the professor.
Yeah, right.
Although I'm not an academician, I certainly have the same curse.
Yeah.
What do you see on the horizon? What do you see for the future of the martial arts here in the United States of America?
Well, I think that we're going to have a large group of very fine-tuned specific sport athletes. That we are going to have less people who are generalists, who do football and basketball and play baseball and then do judo in the summer. You're going to have people who specialize in one thing, and that's what they do. And it will, of course, bias towards the parents who can afford it and can afford the lessons and things like that. I think that's bad. I think that having a broad experience in many different sports is important. It's good for you physically, it's good for you mentally, and including martial arts in your sports portfolio will always help you.
Well, the martial arts, to me, are a vehicle that will get you things that you just won't get that whole package anywhere else. You get a lot of it somewhere else.
Sure.
But you're not going to get the whole thing.
Sure, and some people don't approach martial arts that way. Some people just want to go to class and have fun. They're never going to compete. They're never going to do any of those things.
And that's fine. But
And
they'll
that's fine.
still get a lot out of it.
They'll get a lot out of it, but they won't get the whole package. But I do think that the heyday of the martial arts is over.
I agree.
And just if you were to look at numbers and participation and things like that, I think it's to the detriment. But I feel, like we said, I feel that there's a lot of good things that martial arts can teach you. I think that there's so many kids out there who are just perfect candidates for it. Play video games all day, don't have good social interaction, sit at home and do nothing. And
Yeah, I agree. I've said 1,000 times that there's the martial arts, this little tiny model of real life.
yeah,
And what makes you successful in this little tiny model of real life will make you successful as soon as you walk out that door too.
yeah, and that's the argument for sports in general, right? But the thing with martial arts is there are very few sports that may save your life someday.
That's true. That's an added bonus, a pretty big one too.
And
especially with things the way they are these days.
That's right. And with predators and prey, I would much rather I feel my responsibility as a dad of 2 boys when they were going out, that they should be able to defend themselves. So,
Well, you better be nice to them.